So I get a lot of questions where people ask me, how are your aquariums so clean? How do the plants look so healthy? How is the water so clear? So I decided to make a video today explaining everything, and spoiler, there's no secret, there's no product in a bottle that achieves this. Really, it is about understanding the fundamentals of the aquascaping approach to planted aquariums. It's about discipline and it's about patience. So this isn't a tutorial. This is real, no BS advice that you can either follow or not follow about how to achieve the results I achieve. What qualifies me to tell you this? Well, I've been in the aquascaping hobby for about 10 years, and if that number is not enough for you, just take a look at my tanks. If that's something that you appreciate and that you want to emulate, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get those results. So without further ado, let's get started. The general approach is about balance. In aquariums, there's something that I refer to as the holy trinity. That's your lighting, your CO2, and your fertilizer. Plants need all of those, okay? Lighting, it drives everything. If you think about a car, it's like the accelerator. The more intense your light, the faster things are gonna move in your aquarium. That includes plant growth, but that also includes algae and certain types of bacteria. Good bacteria, bad bacteria. But not all light is created equal. I have an entire video breaking down the type of light that our aquarium plants need and the types of lights that have those. So first of all, take a look at that video for a deep, nerdy dive on it, but you wanna make sure you're getting a light that is engineered to provide the spectrum of light that aquarium plants need to thrive. Next thing you wanna look at is your photo period and the intensity of the light. If you have a ton of algae, first thing I would do is turn down that intensity of the light a little bit. And I recommend running your light for 7 hours. Been doing that for about a decade. It's a good number. You can tweak, give or take an hour or two, but I think 7 hours is just a great starting point for everybody, and I run all my tanks at 7 hours. Moving on to the other parameters of CO2 and fertilizer. Not all aquariums need CO2 to thrive, look good, be algae-free, but it sure as hell helps. If we're gonna use the analogy of health and fitness, something I'm also passionate about, you don't necessarily have to eat healthy and work out to look great, but most people do, and everybody's gonna benefit from it. Same thing goes for CO2. Sure, you could go without CO2, grow some plants that are lower demanding, and hopefully your tank works out and things look decent, but if you're trying to emulate the types of tanks that I set up, which are high energy systems with more demanding plants, where everything is really lush, optimal, almost like hyper reality, yeah, you're gonna need CO2 to make that happen. And if you skip that part, it's like trying to get jacked and super fit without working out or eating right. Maybe you can make it work, but odds are you're just not stacking the odds in your favor. So run your CO2. The bubbles per second means nothing. Get a lot of comments saying I have X bubbles per second. It doesn't mean anything because depending on the size of the tank, the pressure of your regulator, all sorts of factors, the BPS is gonna just vary so significantly. What you wanna look at is the parts per million of CO2 that are dissolved in your aquarium by the time the light turns on, because that's when your plants are gonna use that CO2. And you don't have to get nerdy and measure that with beakers and test tubes. All you have to do is get a CO2 drop checker. If that bad boy is lime green by the time the lights turn on, that means you're all set, and then it should be about lime green throughout the duration of the photo period. That's your CO2. Invest in it once, you're good to go, you'll be able to grow any plant. Next part of the process, fertilizer. Just like humans, plants need macronutrients and micronutrients to thrive. Where they get that is from the soil and from liquid fertilizers. So I always recommend using a quality AQUASOIL. AQUASOIL itself isn't necessarily intensely nutrient rich, but what it has is something called high CAC. That stands for cation exchange capacity. That's a nerdy term. All that means is that the soil is gonna retain and hold on to nutrients that your plant roots can kind of grab at will. You ensure that your soil can store nutrients for plants so that when their root system is developed, they can grab them and create more plant. And I always dose liquid fertilizer in my aquariums. I've used every product under the sun. I wouldn't say any one product is superior to the other. However, I like the all-in-one solutions. There's some product lines from companies where you have to buy 5, 6 different bottles. Ain't nobody got time for that, even me, and I do this for a living, run a YouTube channel, social media. I don't even have time for that. So get it all in one bottle. I cannot recommend enough UNS plant food. I've tested it for about a year. It's phenomenal. My entire studio space runs on it. They have a min, they have a max. The min is great for an iwagumi. The max is great for your densely planted aquarium. It's got all the micronutrients your plants need. It's got all the macronutrients, and you just pump it depending on the volume of water that your aquarium has, and you're good to go. So if your aquarium looks suboptimal, first thing you want to do is ask yourself, have I properly addressed the holy trinity, which is your lighting, your ferts, and your CO2? And if you did make a change, you need to give things about 2 weeks to see the results, okay? So that's step one, that's the holistic approach. Now we're gonna talk about water quality and water clarity. So when people are asking me, how are your tanks so crystal clear? What they're really asking, whether they know this or not, is how is your water so free of suspended particles? That's all water clarity is. When water appears opaque or not clear to us, it just means that there's debris that is suspended in the water that isn't getting, cycled out or isn't settling. So number one solution to that is over filter your aquariums. This is something that very, very few hobbyists take advantage of. I learned it many years ago from some of my mentors, the guys at Green Aqua, Yuri Zuchayev's, George Farmer. All those guys whose scapes I try and emulate and whose results I really admire, they all run large external canister filters, even on small nano aquariums. And I have adapted this practice, and even when I first got into the hobby and I was using this practice, I've never dealt with water that's not clear. Yeah, when you first set up an aquarium, it'll be, cloudy for a few hours, but I get a ton of DMs asking me, oh, do I have to rinse my substrate? Do I have to rinse my sand? Never in a million years, if you filter your aquarium properly, will you ever have to rinse anything. That's what a filter is for. So get an external canister filter. It's totally worth the investment. Then you never have to worry about water clarity. Here's the added benefit that outweighs the aesthetic of clear water. You're gonna be able to house a ton of extra beneficial bacteria with a large external canister filter. I have a little UNS 5S, which is less than 5 gallons, but I have a large external canister filter connected to that, which allows me to put a ton of beneficial bacteria in it. And ultimately, being able to house extra beneficial bacteria is going to balance things out quicker, and it's going to make for a healthier system that allows for your plants to thrive and prevents algae from taking any sort of a visual foothold in your aquarium. The next thing we're going to talk about is maintenance. So many people who get into this hobby are drawn to the beauty of planted aquariums and aquascapes, but they don't want to do any of the work. To use the analogy of health and fitness again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, was quoted as saying something like, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to pick up heavy weights. It's the same thing with aquariums. Everybody wants a nice, thriving aquascape, but nobody wants to do a water change. I'm sorry, you have to do maintenance, especially in the beginning. Now, I want to give you some hope, okay? All of the aquariums in my space have been around for at least 6 months, some of them about a year or more. So they're quite mature. And I'm at the point where I cannot maintain them for a week to 10 days and they're still gonna look pretty good. But when aquarium is new, those first 6 months, consistent maintenance, if you're running a high energy system, it is absolutely necessary. I get a ton of comments saying you don't have to do water changes, you don't have to do maintenance. That just depends on what you want. Again, you don't have to work out, you don't have to eat healthy to look decent, right? But if you wanna be super fit, super jacked, it's recommended you do those things. It's going to pretty much guarantee you quality results. And that's the same with aquariums, right? If you want systems like these that look pristine, where the plants are thriving, where there's really no visible algae, you have to do your maintenance. And consistent water changes, 1 to 2 times a week. You just need to make it a part of your lifestyle. You need to make it something that you enjoy so that it's not this terrible chore. Because if you want these types of systems, I just believe that that discipline, especially on a consistent level, is really necessary. And if it's something you don't want to do, then this probably isn't the hobby for you, or you just need to settle for, an aquarium that is not at this level. And I'm not trying to say this is superior to other types of aquariums, but you cannot have this type of system without putting some work in. So consistent maintenance, make it a part of your life, make sure you enjoy it, and that's gonna help big time. So the last thing I want to talk about is experience and patience. And these are fairly underrated qualities in this hobby that not a lot of people talk about. But when I first got into the hobby, it's really about just making a ton of mistakes, about killing plants, about nuking tanks. And unfortunately, we lose a lot of fish and shrimp in that process too. And what you need to do is just learn from all those mistakes. Be super analytical. Anytime you make a mistake, check out the results. Be like, all right, what went wrong? How can I fix this? And over time, that experience hardens into wisdom. And I've been in the high-tech, high-energy aquascaping hobby for about a decade now. So because of that, I have some wisdom, and that gives me the confidence to sort of work with plants and work with setups and be able to predict those results. And the other thing I've learned through that wisdom is beautiful results just take patience. A lot of people set up an aquarium in this hobby, and after a couple weeks, they're like, why do I have algae? Why do I have diatoms? Why does my aquarium not look pristine and beautiful like yours? Well, mine don't after a week or two. It usually takes 3 to 6 months before I can really confidently post a picture and be like, okay, yeah, this is kind of hitting the vision. Sometimes it takes way longer. I don't know how people are able to achieve results faster, but it really takes a long time for my plants to thrive. And what I believe it comes down to is them adapting to your water conditions first and foremost, and establishing a really deep, mature root system that is symbiotic with the bacteria in your soil. Once that happens, your plants will explode with growth. They'll outcompete algae and diatoms, and things will just be consistently beautiful. But in the beginning, in aquascaping, we're kind of trying to create these hyper reality situations that don't exactly exist in nature. You're not gonna find anything that looks like this in nature, right? So in order to do that, you kind of have to fight against nature a little bit. And I often hear that aquariums are like nature, and people say, oh, there's no water changes in nature. Well, actually, yes, there is. They're big open systems. So because of the fact that these are glass boxes that are closed systems, I strongly disagree with the idea that they're nature. They're not nature. The only aspect of nature that they are is sort of taking inspiration from the design factors, because these are artificial systems in a closed box. So you can't necessarily look to nature and expect positive results. Be inspired by nature from a design perspective, but yeah, you have to do maintenance. You have to address the Holy Trinity. You have to have patience. You have to have experience. It's not about perfection. It's just about showing up consistently to get the results that you seek out to achieve. So I hope this video helps. Again, I have a ton of products that I use through UNS and Boost Plant that are tried and true. Been using them for almost a decade. These are the products I swear by. But the cold hard truth is there is no lightning in a bottle or single product. Try different brands, find things that work for you, work for your budget, but I'm always gonna recommend the things I use because they're tried and tested. So check the description down below if you wanna check out some of the products I use, but don't be afraid to experiment, and do not cherry pick information. If any of this advice doesn't resonate because you're like, oh, I'm a little bit lazy, I don't wanna do maintenance, you gotta check yourself there, because if you start cherry picking advice based on your convenience, you're not gonna have optimal results. So be honest with yourself if you want these types of results. Thanks for watching. This has been Logan with Logan Rando Aquascaping. Catch you guys and gals next time.